Let's condense the nonsense surrounding this Amber Heard appeal bond. To file an appeal, she only has to file a small bond to cover some court costs. That's it. If she does not want Johnny Depp to be able to collect on the judgment he has, however, she has to file a suspending bond or a letter of credit that is in the amount of the entire judgment plus some calculated cost. So that is the source likely of most of the confusion surrounding this. Obviously, she does not want him to collect. So to prevent that while the appeal is pending, she would have to post a bond or letter of credit for the full amount of the judgment. Let's look at the actual statute. Under subsection A, security for cost of appeal of right to Court of Appeals, which would be the case here, is an appeal bond or letter of credit in the penalty of $500 or such sum as the trial court may require. So basically a small bond. But if you skip down to subsection C, you see what the real meat of this thing is. Security for suspension of execution, which means stopping the other party from collecting on the judgment. If you want that to happen, then you must file a suspending bond or letter of credit conditioned on the performance or satisfaction of the judgment and payment of all damages. There has been a lot of confusion about this in that people think she can't even appeal unless she can somehow afford or find the money to either post the collateral or the bond in order to file the appeal, but that's simply not correct. Some of this confusion is likely because Virginia appellate law and procedure in civil courts has been subject to a great deal of change at the beginning of this year. And some of it is also because there are some courts in Virginia, i.e. district courts, where in order to appeal, you do have to post the entire amount of the judgment. Let's look at this statute. But what you need to know about that is that a district court is subordinate to the circuit courts, and circuit court is where the Depp trial occurred. District court only handles smaller cases, so a bond in a case like that would be subject to a much smaller maximum. But however, in circuit court, bonds are subject to a maximum of $25 million, so they can be quite large, and they do cover the Depp verdict. Ms. Heard's attorneys have gone on record, or at least in the media, to say that she cannot afford to pay the judgment. That's a big problem if you have to file a letter of credit or a bond, because the bond companies don't want to pay your judgment any more than you do. Let's take a look at this little note here from Colonial Surety. You can see, at least they say in the advertisement, at the early stages of applying for an appeal bond, you have to have 120% of the amount of the judgment or the bond you want as collateral. So you can't come to them and say, I have a judgment against me for $10 million. I only have $1 million. How would you like to post a bond for that so that you can pay it so that I don't have to pay it? It's not going to work that way. It's not going to be easy to get this bond. It won't be cheap to get a bond like that either. The courts do have the power and the authority to modify the amount of security involved in an appeal. However, Law and Crime Network reports that in oral statements in the court hearing that the judge indicated that she was going to require the suspension bond to be the full amount. Really, the best thing for Depp would be if Heard posted some kind of bond. Yes, he doesn't get the money immediately, which he wouldn't anyway from her. However, he does have an entity on the hook with the court who has pledged the full collateral of the judgment. So his collection process would be much easier. It could be done in state and against an entity that the court had approved as solvent and able to satisfy the entire judgment. If that doesn't happen and she does not post this kind of bond, and he has to move to collection, he has to go to where the assets are. So he has to take his Virginia judgment to wherever she may have her money, property, or whatever. That could be California, could be any state. I don't know where she goes or where she's moved or is moving her assets. There's an entire subsection of legal practice involved in protecting assets and going after assets. But in any case, if he does go to another state, he has to take his Virginia judgment, go to court in that state, and then do what is called domesticating the judgment. And that allows the new state, the one he's going into, to exercise the judgment from the other state. Basically, under the full faith and credit clause of the Constitution, states have to respect each other's judgments, and then he will begin the collection process in that state after he follows that state's procedure. That's a long process. It's an expensive process. It's not going to be fun for anybody. So for him, he would certainly prefer, I would think, that she does post this bond. It makes his life a lot simpler. So suspending the collection on the judgment, that's expensive. Paying the lawyers to handle the appeal, that's expensive. Heard says she has limited assets, so those things are doubly hard for her. In that case, I'd be shocked if the attorneys in the background weren't discussing this case and some possibility of bringing it to resolution, ending the appeals, reaching some kind of conclusion on how they will deal with the money judgments and bringing this thing to an end, because otherwise it's just going to go on and cost her more money. The trial looked pretty clean. You never know what's going to happen on appeal, but the appellate courts are not in the habit of just reversing things for new trial because of tiny little non-material errors. So they're really going to have to show something occurred in the case that was unfair and would have or could have changed the outcome, something that seriously violated procedure. Did that happen? I didn't see it. Who knows? We haven't seen their appeal yet. But again, I think this case likely will come to some kind of conclusion short of having a multi-year appeal process that results in a sheriff's department somewhere going after Amber Heard's assets and money. That seems unlikely. I think this thing will get settled. Johnny Depp is motivated to do that from the statements he's made. However, it did go all the way to trial, so we'll just have to see. But hopefully this has removed some of the confusion around the bond issue.